407-422-1212. That's 407-422-1212 or text 23680.
Ooh, it's time for that hippity hop music I love. Here it comes. I know. Ready? 3. Welcome to Stages of Life Radio. We are live. That's one of the reasons I introduce the show like I do, Dr. Dave.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's so that they know. They're like, oh my God, this can't possibly be a pre-recorded show.
Not now, anyway.
No, seriously, we are live every Sunday afternoon, 4 until 5 p.m. Dr. David Klein taking your medical questions and expounding his wisdom in all things medical. And today, Dr. Klein has decided to embrace inflammation.
Yeah.
Inflammation.
Yeah, this is one of these sorts of issues. It's one of these sorts of problems. They're words. It's a word. It's just a word. Mm-hmm. It's a word that people use. And generally, they don't understand what it is, what the significance is, and really why they should care. Mm-hmm. Inflammation. What is inflammation? What's an anti-inflammatory?
I don't know. It's swell that you brought up this subject.
It's a great idea to talk about inflammation. No, inflammation, okay, may be one of the undercurrents, the undertows, let's just say the mines, okay, that get us into trouble. So inflammation may be responsible for disease as diverse as diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer. Now think about that for a second. You say, well, I'm not interested in inflammation because what does that have to do with me? I don't have arthritis. What's one type of inflammation? So itis, okay, the suffix itis in Latin is derived from inflammation. It's inflamed or infected. So why is this important? Well, it's terribly important because this is one of the body's main defense mechanisms from things like infection. But it may also be one of its downfalls. When you end up with inflammation that remains chronic, unchallenged, or that it gets out of hand, it acts more like one of those California wildfires. You know, those things will burn for weeks and months and do millions and billions of dollars worth of improvements to parts of the state and destruction to others. With regards to inflammation in your body, you can end up with permanent damage to the joints from arthritis. Rheumatoid, in particular, can leave joints destroyed. Or you can end up with inflammation that's necessary to lay down new muscle. So when you go out and work out at the gym, I'm going to go there and I'm going to feel the burn. Okay, all right. Well, you knock yourself out. That's not my cup of tea. I think I'll stay home and chase your wife. No,
hey.
no. So what's inflammation all about? So the body starts to break down a little bit. Certain cells, white cells, kind of head into the area, and then a cascade tends to occur. A chemical cascade, and you're going to hear and read a good bit about this with COVID. So what is it all about? So you're looking at these inflammatory cascades that precede ending up on the ventilator and dying. And why is that? Because inflammation in the wrong circumstance or out of control can, in fact, lead to tissue damage and death. Mm-hmm. Pneumonia. What is it that kills you with pneumonia? Is it the pus in the lungs? It's actually the fluid accumulation that prevents the oxygen from being exchanged. So the inflammation itself is what causes death in pneumonia. So why am I going to bring this up today? And the answer is very simple. Because it's something that everybody that lives and breathes in an adult world, the adolescents, the teenagers, the young adults, the millennials, they may not really care about this yet until they start seeing the hair disappearing.
Ooh, yeah.
Until they start seeing their performance, degrade. And then they're going to wonder what it's all about. So chemically, inflammation is kind of interesting. It is not a simple A results in B results in C. There are over 150 different chemical modulators of inflammation. So one of the fun things is in medical meetings, if you're speaking, would be to ask, okay, is there anybody out there that can tell me what the first modulator of inflammation, what was the first one ever discovered? They're going to come back and they're going to go, oh, well, cyclooxygenase, because, leukotrienes and arachidonic acid. And the answer is negatory, Batman. It's histamine. So antihistamines are actually anti-inflammatories of a particular nature. So when you end up with sinusitis, when you end up with allergic dermatitis, we take these antihistamines. They're also mildly anticholinergic. Okay, acetylcholine is another modulator of inflammation. So what is it all about? So you're trying to shut down dysfunctional or inconvenient in some cases inflammation. And you do this by looking for the appropriate chemical to interfere with this, whether it's natural or whether it is pharmaceutical. It really doesn't matter. Your body is looking for a change. So antihistamines are marvelous anti-inflammatories when it comes to certain types of problems, but they're useless with others. There are many different cyclooxygenase modulators or inhibitors. These are things you'll know as naproxen. You'll know them as aspirin, perhaps. There are many of them. Indomethacin was one of the earlier ones, and they change the way the body kind of creates this cascade. But that is not it. That is not all there is to it. How does the body control it? How does the body initiate it? How does the body stop it? How does it channel it? And why should you care? And the answer is because if you don't, you end up with these chronic disease states. You end up with chronic problems. You end up with degradation in performance. You end up with degradation in life expectancy, and it just doesn't end well at all. So what we're going to do when we come back after the first caller is we're going to start talking about what you can do to A, figure out what the modulators might be, and B, how do you step in front of it and fix it. So let's go to the phone. What do we have today?
We got Tom from Oviedo. Hey, Tom, how you doing? Tom is 62, and he's looking to bring his blood sugar level down. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you did say you're taking berberine, right?
Yes.
Okay. How high is your...
I started off with 2 a day, and now I'm doing 8 a day the last couple days.
Well, that's a lot of berberine there, bro. Okay. So how high is your blood sugar getting?
All right. This morning it was 140.
Okay.
Let's
let's take averages because we're going to run out of time here pretty quickly if we don't hustle. So what are your ranges? What are you heading?
The highest was like 170.
Okay.
7 yesterday, and down to 146 by the evening.
Well, here's the deal. You're taking berberine, which is a good choice, but it's kind of like picking your favorite brass piece in an orchestra. There's far more to it than just berberine. I use berberine when an individual's blood sugar is high and their insulin is high. So if you know your blood sugar, what's your insulin doing? Do you know offhand?
No, I don't.
Okay, then berberine would not have been a good first choice. So, because just simply by the way that berberine works. So generally speaking, when somebody walks into my office and their blood sugar is out of control, or if it's too high, in your case, it's both. I would be starting you on one called metformin, possibly one called glyburide. And the reason I would do that is it hits a particular portion of the insulin receptor that just brings things down fairly quickly, and both of those medications are darn near free. They're very, very cheap. And so I like to start with cheap first. Metformin does a bunch of things for you in addition to lowering blood sugar and lowering insulin. Glyburide works along with it, although I typically don't dial it in until after I'm done bringing metformin to its tolerance level. But the other place where you need to start working with this to bring your blood sugar down is to use things where you get more than one bang for your buck. So if you don't know your insulin and you don't know your triglyceride levels, picking berberine makes no sense. Second thing is once you get past 4 per day of those, you're doing no good to yourself. It will not make any difference. So generally speaking, I go with 1 berberine twice a day. Then I'll start dialing up things like vanadium and chromium. I'll use magic minerals, and 2 that I will add diabetstat. Why? Because vanadium and chromium are called insulinomimetics. And what they will do is sensitize the insulin receptor to the insulin and bring down the blood sugar. What else would you use? Inositol. Why inositol? Because not only will it bring down blood sugar and insulin, but it'll lower cholesterol. So you need to know what these other parameters are doing. And we'll get back to this after these important announcements from our sponsors.
You're listening to Stages of Life Radio with Dr. David Klein on News Radio WFLA Orlando. For more information about the products that Dr. Dave was just talking about, go to stagesoflifevitamins.com. And as he said, we'll be back to take more phone calls and to continue the conversation on inflammation. That's coming up next on Stages of Life Radio. All right, Internet, how we doing? Okay, so we're now on the net. You got any questions for the doc? I see there are a bunch of people out there listening. Yes.
Yeah, that's a particularly good question that fellow is asking. Okay, and we're going to pull it in, after the break, after these brief announcements. Why? Okay, because insulin is highly inflammatory. So if your insulin level is high, then you will start seeing many other problems that go along with it. And people come and say, well, how can my insulin be high and I'm diabetic? And the answer is because that happens 9.5 times out of 10. If you don't test your insulin level, you will never know. Juvenile onset diabetes, it's diabetes type 1. A little bit different. The pancreas gets fried. Could be autoimmune, but it could also be viral. It could be any number of different things. Pancreas disappears, and then you have a very different situation with no insulin. So, somebody comes in with insulin-dependent diabetes, and they're 50 years old. They've never had it before, and all of a sudden, bam! They're feeling cruddy, and their blood sugar's going out of whack. So, what is one of the things you best think about in these days? It's called hepatitis C, because that is a presentation of Hep C. You end up with somebody who's a quote-unquote baby boomer. Anybody can get Hep C. Anybody can get vitamin C, but anybody can get hepatitis C, and it can cost you your pancreas. How does it do this? It does it by inflammation, backflow into the pancreas. The thing gets inflamed and burns out. So I've seen this more than once. It's not a pretty picture. So an adult where all of a sudden your blood sugar came in at 500, look at the liver. It could be a gallstone, could be hepatitis. Either way, you need to fix it. So.
I'm still listening to you.
Well, that's good.
You got 2 minutes. I'm just trying to share. Hey, you guys watching on the internet, share if you care. I don't know what the heck this is. All of a sudden I can't figure it out. I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, but it's impressive. Whatever you're doing with that, you're tapping away like crazy. So either you're getting a bet down, or you're fixing something.
No, the Patriots won though. In the last few minutes of the game by a field goal, I believe. They really are bad. I hope the Bucks.
It's about time they give somebody else a turn. I mean, really, isn't that the way that we're going to be looking at politics now? It's my turn. I may not be the best, but it's my turn.
I was just talking to a guy whose parents are from another country. And he said they look at us and they go, "But you're all Americans. What's the problem?"
Yeah, there you go.
And it really doesn't really make that much of a difference.
No,
not really.
No, it doesn't. It's at the end of the day. Yeah. Okay, we're not going to be running around with pitchforks and torches, unless you're from Antifa. Okay, so I was at Target yesterday looking for whatever junk we have to get for the holiday coming up. So there we are, we're running around Target. That was before we did the grand tour of all the big lots in Central Florida, trying to buy black sheets. Now, black sheets. Why would anybody want black sheets? Because we have a freeze coming up, right? Okay, and so Tess, my wife, is an interior decorator who thinks that she's an exterior decorator.
42 seconds.
we can't put just regular sheets over the delicate plants. They have to color coordinate. Oh. So we're out there looking for black sheets. So people are looking at me. Why did you just buy 30 pairs? 30 pairs of black sheets. And it's really simple. We were going to have an Antifa Klan rally.
Is weird. Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining us today, Rob. Yeah, just about that time to get back to the radio now. 12 seconds and counting. Yeah. Thanks for joining us on the internet. We appreciate that. It's always a good time. Share if you care. And
here we go.
Welcome back to Stages of Life Radio with Dr. David Klein. I am Melissa Fox. We do this Sunday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 5. You can always call in with your questions at 407-422-1212 or the text line, which is wide open right now, unless you want to answer that question about azaleas. 23680. 23680 is the text line. Those are always fun as well. Now, Dr. Klein is always accepting new patients. You can give him a call, 407-679-3337. That's the office. Or just go to stagesoflifemedicalinstitute.com. Now, we were talking about inflammation, and then we had a call from Tom, I believe, in Oviedo, about insulin and such, and they all come together.
You betcha. Okay, so he's concerned that his blood sugar is in the 140s to 170s, and he should be. Mm-hmm. What's a normal blood sugar? A lot of people go, I know. Well, a normal blood sugar is not, it would, at the highest level, the upper limit's about 100. It used to be 140. We lowered it to 100. But while it's true that doesn't give you a label if it's 105 or 110, your longevity decreases for every milligram percent over 85. So what do you think a good, healthy blood sugar is going to be? And the answer is 75 to 85. That is my target for my patients. So normal, abnormal, not so concerned about. What I am concerned about is what's optimal. Now, what is an optimal insulin level? Most doctors don't even know that you can measure insulin, and that would mean anything. So normal insulin, if you're looking at a Gaussian curve, a bell-shaped curve, and chop off the upper 2.5 and lower 2.5%, said, okay, 95% of the population will have it up to about 25. But again, what is a healthy insulin level? And it's below 10. Normal blood sugar, insulin below 10, and your longevity is going to be considerably greater than if you did it any other way. So when you're looking at diabetes in particular, it's not good enough to look at the blood sugar. The A1C simply tells the doctor how good you've been over a 90-day window, but it certainly doesn't give you very much information other than that. More so, it's highly variable. So it can be, it can be much higher in some individuals than others. And all A1C is, and people say, what's A1C anyway? Hemoglobin A1C is glycosylated hemoglobin, and that's sometimes known as oxidation or caramelization if you're a cook. Caramelization, it's what happens to your blood vessels, and it's the same thing that happens to onions in a frying pan. Or if you're making flan with a butane torch, what you're doing is you're oxidizing the glucose on the ends of these or on the surfaces of the red cells, and it makes them stiffer, and it makes it more likely that you're going to end up with atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries for those of you that need it to be spelled out that way. So what is it, and why do we care about insulin? Because it's pro-inflammatory. It is an inflammatory modulator. So there are people out there that'll wonder, well, gee, if it's so inflammatory, why don't I ache all over? And the answer is you are. You just came in telling me that you have fibromyalgia. I ache all over, and I don't know why. Your insulin's 30 because you're insulin resistant. That is enough reason for it. Insulin is pro-inflammatory. High levels of insulin do, in fact, lead to bad things like cancer. Don't believe it? There's a thing called the Warburg effect. The Warburg effect is this. It's very simple. It was discovered in the 1930s that cancer cells differ from non-cancer cells in one principal way, physiologically. Yeah, true enough, they grow faster and uncontrolled and all that happiness. Great. They're invasive. Yeah, we get it. But what do? What they do is they are glucose obligate consumers. That means they have one type of fuel that they'll consume, and that's sugar. Whereas other cells can consume triglycerides, they can consume amino acids, many different fuels, and survive. So when you have high sugar and such, you're actually selectively feeding cancer cells. And then if your insulin goes up, it supercharges the process. It's like taking a kid, a misbehaving little boy, and giving him coffee and chocolate and a puppy, and then expecting good things to happen to your living room. It just isn't going to happen. So what is inflammation all about? Okay, so how do you control it? The first thing that I like to do is measure. Why? Because you don't know what you've got unless you throw the stones over, look underneath, figure out what the heck's going on, and then if you can, you try to figure out why. Why did the insulin go up? Why did the blood sugar go up? Why did the triglycerides go up? Triglycerides are highly inflammatory. Uric acid, highly inflammatory. When was the last time you had your uric acid checked? Now, when I was a boy in medical school, we used to check everybody's uric acid levels. That stopped. And you know why it stopped? When Medicare and Blue Cross started bundling these lab studies, you had to start throwing things out in order for you to be able to keep your doors open. So uric acid was considered to be disposable. So we would do electrolytes, but not do the uric acids. So about 3 years ago, I started redoing that. I thought about it. I said, what kind of idiot are you, Klein? And I started doing uric acids on my patients, and I'm starting to find individuals that have early kidney failure where their uric acid levels go up. Well, wouldn't you know, kidney failure can make the uric acid levels to go up. But what I discovered was that when I made their uric acids come down, the kidney function improved. You are not supposed to be able to do that. And yet it was extraordinarily reproducible. So folks coming in with stage 3 kidney failure, give them allopurinol and tell them to stay away from shellfish, and then their EGFR goes up. It gets better. They improve. So, you can go through your life. I was a doctor for 39 years before I figured that out. You would think, that after a period of time, something as simple as that would be obvious, but it just isn't, because you get into a rut. A rut. Even doctors get into ruts. And the difference between a rut and a grave is depth. That's the only difference. So the further you dig your way into a rut, the deeper it gets and the more it starts looking like a grave. So inflammation is wickedly important to every person that's listening right now. So you go, well, what can I possibly do to fix that? Well, I have asthma. Asthma is a bummer. So I take an anti-inflammatory called Singulair. It's a little 10 milligram tablet. It costs about 30 cents. I take it every night before I go to bed. I wake up and I feel pretty good and I breathe a whole lot better. It's an anti-inflammatory. It hits something called leukotrienes. Leukotriene, what the heck kind of inflammation is that? That is very, very important to folks that have respiratory issues, allergies in particular, asthma specifically in this case, but it could be COPD, could be a lot of different things. And so for $5 or $6, $7, $10 a month, you find out whether or not it's going to be a useful anti-inflammatory for your situation. Anti-inflammatories and antioxidants go hand in hand. So we've got these people out there that'll spend a fortune on fancy tuber-derived antioxidants. What's the super tuber? It could be beets. Whatever. No, that's the superfood. As long as you eat lots and lots of beets, you're gonna live to 200 years old. Explain that to the Russians. That's all those folks, the poor folks in Russia eat are beets. My grandparents came from Russia. That's all they ate were beets because that's what they were used to. Nobody's going to feed me beets. I'll tell you right now. I had enough of those suckers when I was a kid.
Bad.
Borscht. Oh, God, I couldn't believe it. It just kind of looked... It looks worse than it tastes. Actually, no, it tastes worse than it looks.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like soupy cranberry juice, but it really isn't.
It's like that deep purple. You're like, it's not.
How can that end?
Then they
well?
dole some sour cream on top of it. You're like, and it's cold?
On top of that borscht.
What is this?
So beets are good for you, but antioxidants are kind of interesting because in many ways they are also anti-inflammatory. As you start doing these things called free radical scavenging, the inflammation goes down. So what are the anti-inflammatories you can get? You can spend a lot of money on super tubers, all right? You can spend lots of money on astaxanthin, zeaxanthin, and whatnot. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way. And you can take oral MSM, which costs about $10 a month, maybe less. It's a good way to go. And you can start dealing with it with other less expensive free radical scavengers like N-acetylcysteine, NAC. So NAC is medical duct tape. It does all kinds of cool stuff, and we'll pick some of this up after these announcements yet again.
Yay! You're listening to Stages of Life Radio with Dr. David Klein. Sundays 4 to 5 p.m. We're live taking your questions at 407-422-1212. Well, yeah, it's like half alive.
Mm-hmm.
Text us at 23680. We'll be right back. Can't find it. There we go. Push the button. Good. Like all over the place. What are you doing over there, Miss Lady? Hi, everybody.
She's counting the ways that she's going to cut off my body parts when we're done tonight.
Yeah.
She's researching.
I am.
I gotta love
Death
it.
by black sheets.
Says you've got to sleep sometime. It's like, oh man. Yeah, we've been watching like these forensic files. Okay, and so it was just really interesting, and all these different ways that these people bumped off their spouses. I find it to be fascinating. Tess takes notes.
I know, right?
Wondering about this. Oh, this looks good.
It's the fear. It used to happen back in the day. The wife would be watching Snapped all Sunday afternoon in the room opposite with the fellas watching the NFL.
Yeah.
Taking notes. And if you ever looked at the women on Snap, they all had that one eye. It's that one weird little. You
What, the
like
weird
the picture,
tattoo?
and you're like, wow, she's kind of, but that eye. Yeah, and there's
The
like
stink eye. Yeah.
Hey, Karen, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for the love about the Patriots. I guess the Chiefs and the Bucks are playing over there in Tampa Bay right now. Not a fan of Tom Brady anymore. I only like the Patriots. I'm not one of those people. There's so many people that just jump ship. Did you know?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
It happens all the time. It happened a few Tuesdays back.
Yeah, did it?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
We're still not sure what that's all about, that election thing.
One way or the other, I think that there's going to be a big stinky that's going to get exposed in about 2 years. When it comes to these sorts of political things in D.C., it usually takes a little bit of time before they really start. Oh, I lived there for 27 years. So it's just the way these things operate. No, they're not going to be able to figure this out before inauguration, but it's not going to make much difference. Because when they start opening up the other cans of worms, it's going to really start to stink in D.C. More so than usual.
More than usual. Wait.
Hmm.
Trying to figure out how you do it.
So what do we got here? Somebody. Oh, so there it goes. If the doc is chasing my wife again at the gym, inflammation is the least of his concerns. True enough.
That is true.
Tell her I miss her.
Sorry, can't spend more time with you, darling. So, did you guys have a nice Thanksgiving out there? What's the deal, huh? How was your festivities?
We did okay, other than the usual family drama that starts to happen. But what we did was we had the announcement. So my stepson announced his elopement with his new wife. Now it's hard for me to say it.
He
Wife.
eloped with the mother of his child.
Yes, that same one actually.
No, I hope good.
Same person.
Scary.
So we had to really put on the show, and we did. So we had hundreds of candles, and we did it outside because if anything else, well, you really can't have it indoors because of COVID.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
1 minute COVID.
Let's just all pretend it's Walmart, and then it'll work out just fine.
Yeah, that'd be no problem.
Yeah, nobody will care. So we did it outside, hundreds of candles, and we had, it just really worked out pretty cool. It was magical. So Tess went out and bought this little globe thing that shot, these LED laser things up into the trees, so it kind of looked like little sprites up in the trees. And yeah, it was nice.
It sounds nice. Were there pictures?
Not too many. I didn't take too many.
See?
I was too
You forgot.
well, no, I was too busy running around, actually, getting chairs and doing the things that you're supposed to do when you have guests over. So, yeah.
Welcome back to Stages of Life Radio on News Radio WFLA Orlando, Sunday afternoons at 4 p.m. Thanks for checking us out. You can also listen to the podcast on the iHeartRadio app. Just search Stages of Life Radio. Give us a holler. We'd love to hear from you. The line is open at 407-422-1212. Again, 407-422-1212. Or you can text 23680. Again, the text line 23680.
There we go.
Whatever. I have to deal with that tomorrow.
Yep.
Let's deal with you today. All right. So, Stages of Life Medical Institute, a wonderful place where you can get your COVID tests, rapid testing, all kinds of stuff. Because we're still in that ditch, as you said, or the rut where we got to get to the holidays. And
Well, the rut's interesting. So far as the testing is concerned, we do lots and lots of testing. And people say, well, the test this and the test that. And then they quote science when they're not scientists. They don't understand what they're quoting, but they repeat it.
I read on WebMD.
WebMD. Gotta love it. Or better than that would be CNN. On CNN, they said, oh, God, there we go. It's almost always a bad bet. So what we do, is we look at the person, the individual, the situation, and recommend what testing is appropriate for that person. So let's say that you went ahead and you took a flight to New York and you came home. Now, all of a sudden, do I need to be tested to go see my employer or my family? And the answer is, if you're smart, you are.
Probably,
But
yeah.
what do? What does it cost? So if you need to go into quarantine, so if you're going to go to Mexico, let's say, you have to get a PCR, an RT-PCR, which we do. We can result those things in...
And the R stands for rapid?
No, it's rapid throughput.
Okay.
It's not the same thing as rapid. The length of time that it has to be on the machine is about an hour and a half, which doesn't make it very rapid. But when you can do 1,000, 2,000, or 3,000 per hour, it makes it rapid throughput. So we can do many tens of thousands of these things per day in the Jacksonville office. Getting the sample to Jacksonville is actually a rate limiting step. So if you're going to go to Mexico, you're going to go to Europe, you're going to go here or there, you have to have that PCR within 72 hours of departure. Try that if there's a 5-day lead time at the major labs. You can't do it. So we have a business called travelpcr.com. We get the sample, we result it, you get it to your phone, and off you go. But now what do you do when you get home? And they'll say, well, you need to be in a 2-week quarantine. So I was reading about Mexico yesterday. You need to go into a 2-week quarantine if you come home from Mexico. I don't want to go into a 2-week quarantine. So what are your options? So you do the RT-PCR. That's the rapid throughput. That's the sensitive one when you get home. And if it's negative when you get home, odds are very, very good it's going to be negative, until you collect it, until you contract it, until you're exposed to it some other way. Or you're in quarantine for 2 weeks. So what's it going to cost you? $150 or a 2-week quarantine. So what's your 2 weeks worth? Is it worth $150? That's the question. So we get lots and lots of people come through for this because it's worth it to them to get out of jail for that $150. If that were, bail bond, you'd pay it in a heartbeat. Here's your $150. Get out of jail free.
Right.
So that's what we do with the testing. Now, as far as the antibodies, and this is something that we do that really doesn't have a tremendous amount of value right now for most people, and that's to measure how much of an antibody you have in your bloodstream, to know whether or not you have immunity. So if you're going to go get the COVID shot, wouldn't it be nice to know if you generated the immunity? It'd be nice to know if you're in that 95%, assuming that it's true. You need to know whether or not you generated a good, healthy immune response, or you get the shot again until it works. So we call that that's an antibody test, IgG or IgM, and it's quantitative. So a quantitative IgG is what you really need to look at to know whether or not you have immunity. And we do them. We're the first in the country to be able to do it and quantify it. Is it expensive? The answer is $99. It's pretty cheap, actually. So, but getting back to inflammation. So when people end up coming down with COVID and then getting really, really sick, what do you test? What blood study do they like to look at before they get out the intubation set and they get the ventilator ready for you? And it's called interleukin 6, a modulator of inflammation, wouldn't you know? Inflammation, interleukin 6. So we measure interleukin 6 in my office. Now, IL-6 goes up with such diseases as diabetes. It goes up modestly. Usually it'll go from the typical under 2 range to 2 to 4. Or if you end up with something more like Hashimoto's, you may see it go up to as much as 6. But when you see it over 10 is when you're in trouble. That is when you start getting really, really sick. So we check everybody for it. And then I discovered something interesting about it. It's not in the literature yet. I plan to write it up when this is all done. And that's that interleukin 6, when it's elevated, you can sometimes frequently pick up asymptomatic urinary tract infections in elderly people. Now that is cool. That is one of the leading killers of elderly, in particular those in nursing homes, is sepsis. That's bacteremia. That's bacteria in your blood from a urinary tract infection. So with a simple blood test that costs about $30, you can detect asymptomatic urinary tract infections in the elderly. So that is a little something I'm going to write up here when it's all said and done. That's like a major contribution when I finish it. If I finish it. But I'm having a blast doing it, I got to tell you. Well, ma'am, it looks like you might have a urinary tract infection. What, makes you think so? I don't pee. When I pee, I don't burn. So, well, good for you. Let's check it. And then sure enough, there it is. It's like, oh, okay. How'd you know? It's a wild guess, ma'am. It's getting down to medicine by the numbers. It's just fun. So inflammation. So the first thing that you need to know, okay, is how do you control it? And the typical response from my point is you need to know where the inflammation is and why you think you've got it. If you have thyroiditis, which I happen to have, inflammation of the thyroid, you treat that entirely different than you treat arthritis. Uveitis. What about the interleukin-6? It goes up. So how do you lower an interleukin-6 or an IL-6? And you do it with this. You do it with curcumin, turmeric, believe it or not. It will lower IL-6s, and it does it cheaply and easily. Almost selectively. I don't know of anything else that'll bring it down. So there are lots of fun things that you can do with medicine. There are lots of fun things that you can do with herbology. Okay, what is that? Just learning something about the plants around you. Learning about nature, learning about nature and natural medicine. So bringing down inflammation, how do you do it and why do you do it? What are the sorts of choices that you've got to make this happen? So one of my favorite things for typical osteoarthritis of the hips, knees, and shoulders is a medication. Okay, it's called hyaluronic acid, except it's not a medication. It's present in your body all the time, in the fluid in your joints. It's present in your ear canals. It is present in almost every cell in the body. The body uses it as an electrical lubricant. It does a few other interesting things, with regards to its electrical properties. But with regards to the joints, it's necessary for joint mobility. It's also necessary for your skin to look good. So if you go to Walgreens or CVS or one of these other stores, you're going to find cosmetics with hyaluronic acid and HA, minute amounts. I mean, you're talking remarkably small amounts. You rub it on the skin, it's supposed to make it look better. I suck that stuff down by the tablespoon. And what does it do? It makes me look like I'm 16. If you're watching us on Facebook, you'll tell that I look just like I'm 16 years old. But it makes my joints, my knees in particular, feel better. My shoulders feel better. Inflammation, arthritis. What do you do, again, about things like the pain you have in your fingers and toes? Well, think through that sugar that you're eating. One of the first things that I do when people come in with quote-unquote fibromyalgia or polyarthritis is I get their diet straightened out as best I can, pulling carbohydrates down as low as I can get them. They start feeling better, wouldn't you know it? Because sugar, glucose, is pro-inflammatory. Bad stuff. So what do? Well, here's some pecan pie, Klein. Yeah, it's like an addiction. And it is, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Fructose, high fructose corn syrup is more addictive than cocaine.
And on that note...
Gotta love it.
No, we know sugar is more addictive than cocaine.
Yeah.
It's a true story, guys. Look it up.
On YouTube.
You can check out the doc. He's local here in Longwood, as a matter of fact. Where is that?
Yeah, kind of hang out downtown.
Yeah, just right on the corner there in Old Longwood Church. Damn it. There it is. Intersection of I-4 and 434 in Longwood,
You've been
Florida.
there often enough.
I know. I was looking for something else. What is it, 1917?
1917 Booth Circle, and it's a piano's throw off of I-4 at 434.
There, you win.
Looking for you.
Like I said, it's good. It's refreshing to, know it's not some serious live or sound like some of that stuff that the other Dr. K does.
Oh, I was mean to him on his Facebook.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was listening, and I couldn't help myself. So I started. Poor guy.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a quick break. Look at that.
He picked a bad topic, is what he did. So I decided to be the secret caller, the secret texter.
No. Did you? How did it work
I
out?
did. You were taking that, or was Lizzie doing? I guess Lizzie was taking the call because she was laughing on the video. It was kind of interesting watching as it popped up. So somebody's asking, what does my diet look like? My diet?
Which end?
On which end? Yeah, it all looks the same on the other end. Okay. First thing is everything in moderation. That's called the Franklin diet. Okay, but you want to cut as much carbohydrate out as you can. You want to reduce the amount of red meat to the extent that it makes sense to do so. I went out and had a hamburger for lunch today. So is that a bad thing or a good thing? That may happen once a week or once every 2 weeks. You just got to be careful. The oils, polyunsaturated oils and fats have got to go away. So if you have an oil or fat that is solid at room temperature, it disappears. Coconut oil goes away. Lard, anything that looks like that disappears.
30 seconds.
And then you're going to want to eat lots of fruits and vegetables. And wouldn't you know, it may be a 2,000.
Welcome back to Stages of Life Radio with Dr. David Klein here on News Radio WFLA Orlando. If you go to the website stagesoflifemedicalinstitute.com, you'll find a directory there for the vitamins, for the radio shows, past and present, as well as the Facebook links and YouTube and all that. Got to thank you for watching us on our social media today at Stages of Life Medical Institute on Facebook. And if you were wondering about any of that earlier talk about COVID and the hotlines, you can go to
travelpcr.com or cruisepcr.com.
There you go. Okay, so there you have that much. Now, we've been talking about inflammation tonight. We've got a few things on the text line as well. I don't know exactly what's going on.
Okay, well, one of them is kind of interesting as it pertains to inflammation, and that's what's a good PSA number?
Yeah.
And, so PSA, prostate-specific antigen, goes up when the prostate becomes cancerous or inflamed. So most men, well, not most men, but a third of all men at the age of 40 to 45 will start developing signs and symptoms of prostatitis. That's almost always infection. So when you end up with suppurative prostatitis, the PSA will go up. So what happens? Once the PSA starts to jump up over 4, that's when the urologists kind of get a little gleam in their eye. And then they're going to come at you and they're going to go, well, we probably should do a biopsy to make sure you don't have prostate cancer. Statistically, the likelihood is very, very small that you have cancer. It's very high that you have infection. When you stick a needle into a prostate, okay, the anatomy is such that it has to pass through the most unclean part of your entire body. Just saying, right? Okay, so a needle goes in, hits that prostate, takes a piece of it out, and you do this 8 or 10 times so you get enough tissue to see what you've got. You spread the infection, so the PSA actually goes up after the needling, and it does it about every time, and sometimes very significantly. Once that happens, you're on this roller coaster ride. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. So be very, very careful the first time they do needle biopsies that you actually have to have it. Ask them to do an ultrasound of the prostate to see if there's anything growing there, or it's an MRI, really. It's a very, very directive MRI, and you'll be able to see what you need to see. But you want to put those needle biopsies off until the last, okay, because they have a tendency to make things worse.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, don't do that unless you absolutely have to.
But they do, and then I get them. And it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? And you have an issue. So you're taking blood a couple times a year, looking at the PSAs, making sure that they don't go up, but they always do. They go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. If you have cancer, they don't go up and down. They tend to go up, 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 up. That's just the way that these things work. So what's a good number? The lower, the better. You want it between 1 and 2. We start to get our blood pressures up a little bit when it goes over 4. Now, what else? Okay, so what are the other sorts of things that we look at for inflammation? So one of the things that we do at Stages of Life is we will do, when asked, okay, is to do cancer antigen screening. Now, PSA, prostate-specific antigen, is a cancer screening test. The government says you can use it as a screen, so we do. But there are many others that are out there that are also very, very interesting. BRCA, okay, is a genetic test looking for propensity for breast cancer. That's one right. We're going to be introducing in a few months. There are many others that we do there. These cancer antigens for thyroid, lung cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, and it's a blood test. So what's the downside to it? Insurance doesn't cover it ever. The good news is that we do it for about an eighth or less of what the commercial labs charge for it. So for, I don't know, between $300 and $350, we'll check between 6 and 8 different cancer antigens. That's a bargain of monumental proportions. Why? Because we have our own lab. We do it ourselves. So cash price is $349, I think, and then boom, you get screened. Do I recommend it? The answer is yes. Once a year when you're over the age of 50. Up until that point, it's kind of silly to do it. Inflammation. So we want to bring it down. So there are many different things that we do in practice to control inflammation, to bring things under wraps, and to prevent processes and degradation. Diabetes, getting it under control. So do you necessarily need to be taking insulin for diabetes? The answer is no. You take insulin as a last resort, not a first resort. If you don't have enough insulin, it makes sense to do it. But taking insulin without looking at insulin levels makes no sense whatsoever.
Can that one of those things that you can never go back either, or what?
No, of course you can go back.
Okay.
I get people off insulin all the time.
Good.
That is not that difficult. Again, you try to figure out what part of the equation is broken. And once you have it figured out, then you pile on. Is it the insulin receptor? It almost always is. So you look at this, which is a Rube Goldberg looking machine. This thing is extraordinarily complicated. When you look at all the pieces and parts in there, it looks like a Swiss watch. What broke? God knows. It could be a bunch of different things, but the most likely is something called AMPK. There's a particular enzyme in there that can be damaged a number of different ways, and that's where metformin works. So we start with metformin. But along with that, we use the minerals because, again, next to zinc and selenium, vanadium and chromium deficiencies are amongst the most common of all micronutrient deficiencies leading to diabetes. So you deal with the underlying processes. Inositol, again, this particular sugar not only brings down blood sugar and lowers cholesterol, but it's an antidepressant. And if you do a little bit of real research, now that doesn't mean WebMD. Okay, WebMD is not research for you or anybody else. That's something that you give to your child so that they can learn how to read, but not study. Inositol actually reduces your risk of cancer. How does this work? Metformin reduces your risk of cancer. How does it work? Vanadium, chromium reduce your risk of cancer. How do they work? And the answer is all the same way, by reducing insulin. You reduce insulin, you reduce cancer risk and increase survivability. So when you do your literature search, you go on something called the National Library of Medicine, PubMed, PubMed.gov, and it's a free service, PubMed.gov. And you can just enjoy this. I love it. I spend more time with PubMed than I do just about anything else in my life except my wife. And, there's certain days where I spend more time on the computer.
Yeah.
So what do you do with this? This is where you learn, and this is where you can hone things down. So I had this notion, God knows why, but I started thinking about Lyme's disease. Lyme's disease, which is actually caused by a spirochete. It's a cell wall deficient organism. It's very hard to get, actually, but it's also very hard to get rid of. And I started thinking about a natural product to treat Lyme's disease. You'd say, well, what the hell am I talking about? And the answer is grapefruit seed extract. Okay, I'll give away the sauce. I'm kind of like Emerald here. I'm going to tell you how to make the best pizza in the world. Exactly. It's grapefruit seed extract. And it goes after these spirochetes as well as a bunch of other viruses and bacteria, and it does it very cheaply. So grapefruit seed extract, I used to use a lot more of it in my practice than I do now. And so I've been getting distracted by this COVID thing. And so I'm starting to reground myself because eventually it too will go away and I'm going to have to get back into really practicing medicine instead of coaching. So in summary, because I've got 1 minute to go.
1 minute.
Inflammation is not just about arthritis. That's probably the least significant portion of the whole thing. So you need to get inflammation under control if you have a hope of controlling diabetes, preventing diabetes, minimizing diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, lupus, any number of different chronic diseases. It's very, very important, and that's one of the many services that we provide at Stages of Life Medical Institute, and you are more than welcome to visit us at 1917 Booth Circle. It's Boothe Circle in Longwood, Florida. 407-679-3337, or visit us on the net at stagesoflifemedicalinstitute.com, stagesoflifevitamins.com.
Say goodbye.
Adios.
We'll do it again next week.
You've been listening to Stages of Life Radio with Dr. David Klein.